Okay, we are live. So for those listening at home, welcome to the Live from the Sword Coast podcast. My name is Kevin Madison, and this is entry 10 in my participation in the RPG A Day event for 2017. And for day 10, the question, I guess, if you're joining us for the first time, this is part of an exercise to answer a different question every day in relation to RPGs or the RPG hobby or our favorite RPGs or whatever. Today's question is, where do you go for RPG reviews? And this is, it was interesting because, I mean, it's an interesting question in the sense that it made me think about how I have changed my my approach to finding out about games. I mean, back in the day, you know, I started playing in '83, and you know, I mean, that was what was in the bookstore. The local bookstore was what was available. I don't think that I went to my first actual proper gaming store until it may not be until I was I think I was in grade 5 before I went there. So it was a while before I actually went to the first one. So at that time, that's how I found out about role-playing games. This is a segue in because the reviews, the purpose of me reading reviews is to find out about games that I want to play. I don't really read them for idle, for idle reading. It's not something, unless I'm actually interested in the game or there's something about it that piques my interest. I'm not really out trying to read to see what's current. I have a problem with too many games to run as it is. So it's not like I'm trying to find new games to necessarily fill my slate. But anyway, when I was old enough to start tracking down, I guess, ideas, to be honest, you know what, even when I was younger, like there were reviews in trade magazines in the 80s and 90s, but I don't think that those really ever affected my my willingness to actually pick up a product. So, and at that time, that was the only, unless it was word of mouth from people in the gaming store, then that was the extent of it. The first place I really remember going on a regular basis for reviews of role-playing games was RPG.net. And for years, that was sort of my go-to place. I would just go there and see what sort of the consensus was. And that was usually quite helpful because a lot of the reviews there were quite comprehensive, and a lot of them were actual playtest reviews. And it's only recently that I've sort of come around to the idea that it's important to actually play a game before offering an opinion, because so many of the games that I have played over the last little while, they play so very differently at the table than what they read. In particular, Savage Worlds plays a lot better than I think it reads. There doesn't seem to be an awful lot of, and again, this is just my biased perspective, but when I first read the game, there didn't seem to be an awful lot to it, so I thought it was too slim of a game. Which led me to, I bought it, I read it, and I sort of gave it up for a number of years until I finally went back and started playing. And I'm like, this is a great game. Like, it's a perfectly functional system. It's quite hot where I am right now, so I'm a little brain dead. Another example, and this is where I use this as an example of where I am now in terms of where I go for my reviews. To be honest, the easiest thing I do now is I do a Google search for name of the game and then a review, and then I read every review. If it's a game that I'm deliberating over getting into, I'll read every review that I can, but good and bad, because I want to really have that crystallize in my mind. I want to know what people think. That's the positives and the negatives as well. And again, I sort of lean more heavily towards actual play reviews because that gives a sense of how it's not how it reads academically, it's how it actually plays, because that's what I'm interested in. I want to know what it's like, what the actual play experience is like. I can read a game and figure out, what I think of it myself, but I want to know whether, it holds together. And the game that I most recently sort of had that experience with was right around the time that Force Awakens came out. I was obviously, as I'm sure many people was really in the grip of kind of Star Wars nostalgia. And while I owned the Saga edition of, I got a complete set of the Saga edition games, and I've got copies of the revised edition in the first one. None of those games really, they didn't play as well at the table as I was hoping. In particular, around the time I was coming off of, I had, when I was running 4th edition D&D quite regularly, we switched over and played some Saga Star Wars. and I nearly killed everyone in the span of like one encounter. Because I've just got used to people having healing surges and stuff like that. And then once I sort of rejigged it, we got back to just playing. But there was so much work to get characters. Like it was so compared to 4th edition, where I could just improv stuff or I could throw monsters together in a matter of minutes. This was a lot harder. It was a lot harder to run. There was a lot more behind the scenes math and crap that I had to keep track of. So it just didn't feel very Star Wars at the table. It didn't have that sort of fast-paced action that I was looking for. And I had looked at the Fantasy Flight Star Wars games, because that's what was out at the time that Force Awakens came out. When Force Awakens came out was around the time that Force and Destiny had just come out. The core book came out a couple of months before, I believe. And the other 2 games, Age of Rebellion and Edge of the Empire, were out already. And I had heard about the proprietary dice thing, and I thought that was a total gimmick, and just decided not to get into it. And I looked at the character building. Like I looked at the core rulebooks and saw that there was this, like what I thought at the time was this ridiculous matrices of talents you had to navigate through to make characters. And it just struck me as like, this is just ridiculous. It's way too complex. It's just silly with options. Like it has just made a flowchart version of the kind of talent trees you go through in Pathfinder. And at the time I was really off of Pathfinder because of too much crunch for me at the time. But then I decided to read some reviews, and I read every review I possibly could. And they cut both ways, more towards the positive, but slightly towards the negative. But there was one person's review who to be honest, I can't remember who it was, that really had the experience that I had or that I ended up having with the game, which was, it reads as being like, there just seems like there's too much game that's going to get in the way of the actual play. But their experience was at the table, if you're inclined towards more improv play, it is really, really suited towards your group and your DM style. So I finally bit the bullet on it, and I ended up buying, I think I got like the core book for Edge of the Empire, and then this beginner kit for Edge of the Empire, and I think maybe one other thing. And that was really it. Well, within a month, I had every book that was available for it, because it just, the game really, really hit the spot that I wanted, and then that led to the nearly 2-year campaign running that game. A year and a half, actually, because we have been on hiatus for quite a bit. But that was a really helpful review, and that's something I would suggest, I guess, in terms of where do I go for reviews, is I cast as wide a net as I can and read everything I can. Go-to sites that I like a lot are Board Game Geek, Bella Lost Souls seem to cover sort of a niche stuff as well. My buddy Jared Rashner reviews a shit ton of games as well, and his reviews are articulate and well thought through too. So even if you don't agree with the conclusions he's coming to, and I agree with almost all the ones that he's come to, it's a very thoughtful analysis. So that's really helpful. I'm lazy, or I shouldn't say that. I've got other shit to do, like game prep or other things where I can just have something playing on in the background. So I do use YouTube quite a bit for reviews. And also, so this is not so much a review, but actual play sessions I find quite helpful to give me an idea of what the game is about too. So even when I read reviews, I do, before I'll pull the trigger on some games, I will actually try and find actual play sessions of it to see what what other people are actually doing with it. Yeah, so that's kind of it, I guess. Oh, and I should mention too, there's a guy named Kurt Weigel who hosts a YouTube channel called Gaming Geeks, or maybe Game Geeks, but his channel is awesome because he reviews almost everything, like from standards like D&D and Traveller and Savage Worlds to really obscure games, or at least from my perspective, obscure games like the Diceless End of the World games that came out from, I think, Cubicle 7. But anyway, he's got a host of old reviews for a whole bunch of different games. So I find him to be quite helpful. And maybe I'll put a link to him, to Jared's blog, and to maybe Bella Lost Souls as well in the link below, so that you can get a sense of some places you can go. But to be honest, I mean, the best bet is to do a search for whatever game you're interested in, and then reviews, and cast a wide net, review, and read through as many as you can, because that will give you, I think, the best sense of of what a game is about without actually picking up and playing it yourself. So anyway, that's my 2 cents on reviews, or where I go for reviews. Tomorrow is, which dead game would you like to see reborn? Now I've got, I've got a bit of an interesting answer, I think, for that. So, because there's this exercise has got me thinking about a game that I ran for quite a while, but just isn't, is currently dead. So anyway, if you have any questions or comments about this video, please feel free to leave comments in the section below, and I will be sure to respond to those. Otherwise, I hope this finds you well, and I will see you again tomorrow, hopefully.